When I married the man I believed to be the love of my life, I never imagined how drastically things would change. The turning point came with the death of his father, which revealed sides of him I hadn't seen before. Suddenly, he was a different man, unfaithful and bitterly contesting the conditions of his father's will. His behavior spiraled uncontrollably, leaving me to question if his actions were driven by grief or a deep-seated defiance. This shift in his demeanor made me doubt my decision. Had I inadvertently tied my life to someone who could potentially be unstable? To give some context, our story began at a charity event organized by my workplace. We initiated a casual conversation and exchanged numbers, but it wasn't until a few months later that we started connecting on a deeper level. He was charismatic and seemed genuinely interested in my perspectives, which was notable considering his strict religious upbringing, a stark contrast to my secular views. Although I was concerned about our religious differences, he reassured me, occasionally making light of his family's objections to him dating someone non-religious. In retrospect, I often wonder if his interest in me was influenced by his desire to challenge his family's expectations. After a year together, he felt it was time for me to meet his family. I was anxious about their reception of me, especially given his descriptions of his father as a domineering figure who missed no opportunity to enforce strict rules, impacting his childhood significantly. I anticipated the meeting with a sense of dread. The dinner was a small gathering with just his immediate family, his parents, brother, sister-in-law, and their young child. Upon arrival, I first met his brother, who was outside on the phone. He seemed amiable. Soon after, I was introduced to Kevin's sister-in-law and her 4-year-old niece, both of whom were delightful. The sister-in-law, who also worked in event planning, and I found much to discuss. As we conversed, Kevin's parents entered the room. My nerves were at their peak, knowing the significance of this introduction in the backdrop of the tightly knit and conservative fabric of his family. The evening was poised at a delicate balance, with my anxieties about their acceptance and the underlying tensions Kevin had hinted at about his father. When Kevin introduced me to his parents, I was taken aback to realize that his father was a prominent figure I recognized from the charity circuit. He helmed a major organization known both locally and internationally, a fact Kevin had never mentioned. While his mother seemed a bit reserved, she wasn't unkind. I later learned that she tended to be cautious around the women Kevin dated due to his past preference for what he described as the wild type. Contrary to my expectations, Kevin's father was genuinely warm and welcoming. He didn't mind my lack of religious affiliation, emphasizing instead the importance he placed on kindness and moral principles over my religious background. During our chat, he mentioned that Kevin's sister-in-law had managed the foundation but stepped back to focus on motherhood. He expressed a belief in the importance of not pulling people away from their families, especially when their children were young, which explained why he had outsourced the last event to my company. Initially, I had thought of Kevin's family as strictly religious, but they turned out to be quite approachable, with a mild religious inclination. Kevin downplayed his father's acceptance, suggesting he might have seen my presence as a fleeting phase similar to his college days, when he dated several girls his parents deemed unconventional. He portrayed these relationships as acts of youthful rebellion. Despite some red flags, I believed Kevin's explanations, perhaps too naively because I was deeply in love. We continued to date for another year before he proposed. We decided to live together before marriage, and during this period, I had an enlightening conversation with Kevin's brother at a family gathering. He shared concerns about Kevin's behavior, recalling his tendency to rebel against their parents during their teenage years, often resulting in conflicts, particularly due to their father's stringent rules. Interestingly, Kevin's father supported our engagement, even offering his backyard for our wedding, a suggestion that Kevin initially resisted. This complex backdrop of family dynamics, past behaviors, and evolving relationships painted a rich tapestry that continued to unfold as we planned our future together. After 3 years of living together and saving up, Kevin and I finally set a wedding date. I managed to convince him to accept his father's generous offer to host the wedding in his family's backyard. Everything seemed to be going well until 3 months ago when tragedy struck. Kevin's father passed away unexpectedly from an aneurysm. This event seemed to trigger a drastic change in Kevin. He began coming home late and was often intoxicated. At first, I attributed his behavior to grief, but soon it raised serious concerns. When I spoke to Kevin's brother, he confided that Kevin didn't appear sad about their father's death. Rather, he seemed almost relieved. Kevin's erratic behavior and the looming uncertainty over the family business prompted me to confront him directly. One night, I waited up for him until he returned around 2 a.m., reeking of alcohol and stumbling around the house. I knew it was futile to reason with him while he was in such a state, but I insisted we needed to talk, especially about the dangers of drunk driving. He brushed off my concerns and ended the conversation abruptly. Realizing it was pointless to discuss anything further at that moment, I went to bed. The next morning, I found him vomiting in the bathroom. Once he had sobered up a bit, I offered him aspirin and some dry crackers and again brought up his reckless behavior. He retorted that with his father gone, he felt free to live as he wished, without any control. I tried to explain the risks involved with his late-night escapades and mentioned his brother's concerns, which only made him angrier. He lashed out, accusing his brother and father of being preoccupied with maintaining appearances and indifferent to his true happiness. He expressed frustration over their attempts to fit him into a lifestyle he despised and judged him for deviating from their expectations. At that moment, I realized that Kevin's perceptions of his family might be skewed. Although he seemed to carry some residual trauma from his controlled upbringing, it appeared he was also trying to provoke his family as a form of retaliation. However, his actions seemed only to bring him more misery, as his family did not react in the way he hoped. Despite my lack of religious beliefs, Kevin's family had always been welcoming and accepting, never forcing their lifestyle or beliefs on me. It was clear that Kevin's struggle with his identity and his family's expectations were deeply intertwined, complicating his path to personal freedom and happiness. Kevin's father even invited me to church once, assuring me there was no pressure to attend. This gesture made me think that perhaps I had only ever seen the best side of him. I couldn't be sure what he had been like during Kevin's childhood. Regardless, it was clear that Kevin needed to mature and find his way in life. Confronting these issues head-on, I asked him directly if his dissatisfaction extended to our marriage. When he admitted he was unhappy, I was left speechless and felt the need to leave. I am currently writing this from my mother's house where I've been staying for the past week. Kevin hasn't reached out, and his brother mentioned that they aren't speaking either. I'm at a loss about what steps to take next. Given the situation, I'm contemplating whether a divorce might be necessary, but I'm hesitant to make such a drastic decision hastily. I wonder if Kevin's recent actions are a coping mechanism for dealing with his father's passing. I'm considering giving him some time to reflect before suggesting we try counseling. From the feedback on the original post, one comment particularly resonated with me. The commenter empathized with my situation and pointed out that while divorce shouldn't be the go-to solution for every marital issue, the consistent problematic behavior exhibited by Kevin, especially following his father's death, was concerning. They found it odd that Kevin chose this moment to act out, questioning whether his motivations might be deeper than just rebelling against his family's expectations. Another commenter suggested that Kevin might be struggling with religious trauma from his upbringing. If his father had been stricter when Kevin was younger, it could have left a significant impact. They mentioned that in some strict religious communities, there is considerable pressure to conform, which might include staying in unhappy marriages. They recommended individual therapy for Kevin to address potential childhood issues, suggesting that while couples counseling is a good start, it might not suffice to resolve deeper individual traumas. These insights have prompted me to think critically about our relationship and the importance of addressing these issues sooner rather than later to prevent further problems. I'm hopeful that counseling, possibly combined with individual therapy for Kevin, will prove beneficial as we navigate this challenging time. Kevin's father once invited me to church, gently stressing that I was under no obligation to attend. This experience led me to wonder if I had only been exposed to his best side, leaving me uncertain about what he was really like during Kevin's youth. Nevertheless, it was clear that Kevin needed to mature and overcome his past grievances to carve out his path in life. Facing our issues, I directly asked Kevin if his unhappiness spilled over into our marriage. When he admitted he wasn't happy, I was stunned and left without a word. Now, I'm writing from my mother's home, where I've been reflecting for the past week. Kevin hasn't reached out, and his brother mentioned that they aren't communicating either. I'm at a crossroads, unsure of what to do next. While the situation seems to call for considering a divorce, I am reluctant to make such a definitive move impulsively. I ponder whether Kevin's recent behavior is a way of coping with his father's death, and I'm thinking about suggesting some time apart before we try counseling. From the feedback I received on the original post, one person empathized with my situation, pointing out that although immediate divorce isn't always the answer, it could be justified by Kevin's consistently troubling behavior, especially now. They found it curious that Kevin chose this time, following his father's passing, to act out, speculating whether his motives might extend beyond simply defying family expectations. Another commenter suggested that Kevin might be dealing with religious trauma from his upbringing. If Kevin's father was a different person back then, it could have deeply affected him. They noted that in some strict religious settings, harsh disciplinary measures are common, and members are often discouraged from ending unhappy marriages. This fixation on his father's approval could signify deeper issues needing exploration. While couples therapy is a good start, individual therapy might be necessary to address Kevin's potential childhood traumas. The kindness his family shows me might not be entirely genuine, but rather a facade tailored for appearances. As I continue to stay at my mother's place, I struggle to articulate my feelings for an update. I feel utterly numb. The complexity of our situation leaves me navigating through a maze of emotions and decisions, questioning both the foundation of our marriage and the path forward. After spending 3 weeks away, I decided to briefly return home, trying to reach Kevin through calls and texts, but he didn't respond. Then, unexpectedly, his sister-in-law called asking to meet for lunch at a local coffee shop where her husband joined us. They inquired about how I was coping and about the situation with Kevin. I didn't hold back. I shared everything: his late nights, excessive drinking, and overall irresponsible behavior. I mentioned that I had been staying at my mother's to give him space and was considering suggesting couples therapy, but unfortunately he hadn't been responding to my attempts to communicate. During our conversation, my brother-in-law revealed a shocking piece of information. Kevin had been misusing the foundation's funds to pay for expensive hotel stays and escorts. When confronted, Kevin claimed he was entitled to the funds as part of his inheritance. However, his brother clarified that the details of their father's will were still being settled, making Kevin's justification baseless. To my surprise, Kevin had also told his brother that we were no longer together, using my temporary move as a supposed reason for his actions. Obviously, this was far from the truth. Kevin's brother and sister-in-law were deeply apologetic for the chaos and expressed their disbelief. They thought Kevin had changed for the better when he married me, just as I had once believed. They explained that Kevin's long-standing resentment toward their father began during their high school years, fueled by Kevin's rebellious activities with a rowdy crowd, which had deeply concerned their father, especially considering their family's tragic past involving a drunk driver. Grateful for their candor, I returned home the next day and resolved to pack most of my belongings. As I was packing, Kevin walked in, silent and somber. He handed me an envelope containing divorce papers. He admitted he knew his siblings had informed me of everything and showed no remorse. He bluntly stated that the only reason he hadn't initiated the divorce sooner was to ensure he wouldn't be excluded from his father's will. With his father gone, he declared his newfound freedom and casually mentioned that he planned to move into a larger, more luxurious home with his inheritance. He offered me the house and informed me that movers would collect his belongings the next day. I was so stunned by the coldness of his confession that I couldn't say a word. I continued packing in silence, eager to distance myself from the situation. Once I had loaded my car with my belongings, I drove back to my parents' house, leaving behind the life I thought I had built with Kevin. I showed my parents the divorce papers and then retreated to my room, where I broke down in tears. I was struggling to understand how my life had taken such a cruel turn, especially given my unwavering commitment to our marriage. Kevin had discarded our relationship as if it meant nothing to him. Tomorrow, I have an appointment scheduled with a divorce attorney. I'm not planning to contest the divorce. If he wants to leave, that's fine by me. Here's the second update for everyone. Things have taken quite an interesting turn. I met with my lawyer, who explained the terms of the settlement to me clearly. I would keep the house, and we would each retain our assets, including wedding gifts and rings. Since we didn't have a joint bank account, there were no financial entanglements to worry about. Honestly, I might end up selling the house. It holds no happy memories for me anymore. Since then, I've been staying at my parents' place, trying to move past this whole ordeal. They seem glad to have me around, or perhaps they are just trying to cheer me up. I plan to find a smaller place once I sell the house. Now, here's the intriguing part. Out of the blue, Kevin's brother called me. After some casual conversation, he asked if I was free the following Monday to join them for a meeting with their father's lawyer to finalize the estate matters. I was unsure why I should be involved, but he insisted it was important for me to be there and assured me that he would ensure Kevin wouldn't approach me and that we would be seated far apart. Reluctantly, I agreed. On Monday morning, I arrived at the lawyer's office. Kevin's brother, now my former brother-in-law, met me outside and thanked me for coming. He escorted me into the office, where Kevin, his mother, and the lawyer were already present. I approached their mother, offering my condolences and asking about her well-being since we hadn't spoken since the funeral. She expressed her sympathies for what had happened between Kevin and me, mentioning that she and her late husband had tried their best to guide him, but he had chosen his path. The lawyer then gathered us to discuss the estate. He apologized for the delays due to various complexities. The crucial part of the meeting revealed that most of the money would be donated to charity to support the foundation. The management of the foundation would pass to the oldest son, excluding Kevin. The remaining funds were allocated to his wife, his eldest son and his wife, and a school fund for his grandchild. Surprisingly, there was a provision for Kevin. He would receive money only if our marriage had lasted at least 6 years. Additionally, if we had a child, a school fund would be established for them. Notably, I was left a substantial sum without any conditions attached. His father had been concerned that Kevin might squander his share on frivolous things like escorts and alcohol. At the end of the meeting, the lawyer informed us he would schedule individual sessions to sign the paperwork and address any questions. As soon as we were dismissed, I left quickly, noticing Kevin's gaze following me from across the room, as if he wanted to talk. I left before he could approach me. As I write this, the next morning, Kevin has been bombarding my phone with calls and messages. Despite his efforts, I want absolutely nothing to do with him after everything he's put me through. Update number 3. Kevin's behavior has become increasingly erratic in his attempts to find me. After failing to reach me through my phone, he started contacting his brother to inquire about my whereabouts. After the unsettling meeting with the lawyer, I hadn't seen any of Kevin's family until I received a cautionary note from his brother, warning me that Kevin was desperately trying to track me down. His words were soon validated when Kevin unexpectedly showed up at my parents' home. Thankfully, I was not there. My father misled him by saying I was out of town without a definite return date. Kevin left a message urging me to contact him, claiming we needed to talk. Despite my reluctance, his continued attempts to reach me felt overwhelming, and I decided to address it to finally put an end to his relentless pursuit. Choosing a time when I felt strong enough emotionally and ready to handle the conversation, I called Kevin one evening. He answered immediately, his voice eager and filled with a feigned joy at hearing from me. He asked about my welfare as if our marital strife was a mere hiccup. He began with an apology for his behavior during our split, recognizing the hurt he had inflicted and admitting he should have honored our commitment, even though he wasn't fully happy. I listened quietly, then clearly stated that I had moved beyond our marriage and was focusing on rebuilding my life. I pressed him for the true reason behind his call. Initially, he insisted it was just to see how I was doing and perhaps keep the lines open for future discussions. I firmly told him that wouldn't be necessary. As I pressed further, he finally admitted that he regretted the divorce, acknowledging that his decisions were influenced by bitterness towards his father and not a true desire to end our marriage. He suggested counseling, hoping to reconcile, but I reminded him that the divorce papers were already filed and legally binding. Our marriage was definitively over, as per his initial wishes. I stressed that he had been the one to push for this outcome, and I had merely respected his wishes. After reiterating my stance, I ended the conversation and decided to cut off all communication with him. I have no desire to revisit a relationship that caused me such distress. Life has been bustling with new beginnings and professional successes. I've been so involved with various projects and life changes. I recently finalized the divorce officially with my lawyer, choosing monthly payments over a lump sum for financial stability. I've also put an offer on a new house and am waiting for approval from the bank. Meanwhile, I met with Kevin's brother and sister again, this time to discuss a charity event in honor of their father, which I'm helping to organize. During this meeting, they updated me on Kevin's erratic behavior, including unfounded accusations against me regarding the division of our assets in the divorce. Moving forward without Kevin is the best path for me, allowing me to focus on my future and the new opportunities ahead. Although they were already aware that divorce records are public and accessible, when confronted about his dishonesty, he vented his frustrations, insisting that I should have returned the house to him, especially since I had received a considerable amount of money from his father. I explained that the house was available for purchase on the market if he truly wanted it back. It was also mentioned that he had moved into an apartment close to his work. Through his brother, he expressed a desire to get involved in our foundation to earn extra income. However, his brother promptly dismissed the idea, citing his previous misuse of foundation funds. This latest episode seems to wrap up the ongoing drama. I am eager to move beyond this turbulent chapter with Aiden and the upheaval he caused in my life. I am resolute in not letting him take up any more of my time. In response to updates from the situation, one top commenter praised me for avoiding the trap, noting that as painful as divorce can be, it's sometimes necessary, likening it to removing a harmful element. They remarked that Aiden was toxic and exploited our relationship to enact a revenge fantasy against his father. Thankfully, his father recognized his questionable character and compensated me for my troubles. The commenter also commended my brother-in-law for his support, recognizing that many remain silent in similar situations. They warned against allowing my ex to manipulate me into reconsidering our relationship, especially regarding having a child together, as he might persist in causing disturbances. Another commenter, however, sympathized somewhat with my ex, suggesting that perhaps I could have reconsidered giving him the house back. They understood that the divorce was final and legalities were settled, acknowledging the hurt he caused, but felt it seemed petty to deny him a place to live. They believed that the legalities could have been managed to transfer the house to his name. They also criticized my father-in-law for imposing conditions on the inheritance that seemed equally petty. If he wanted to misuse the money, that should have been his decision. Making someone stay married for 6 years just to access the funds seems quite inappropriate. Let's open this up for a discussion. I'm particularly interested in your thoughts on the last comment that caused a stir in the original post. While most people disagreed with the commenter, feeling that the ex-husband got his just desserts, this person offered a completely different view. What do you think about this perspective? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. Thanks for joining us today.